Hello and welcome. Between this little introductory part of the video and the recording from the live workshop session, I'm going to be presenting to you some information on formative assessment strategies and tools with technology. So a little bit to get going here. Our goals for this session are to understand and identify formative assessment tools and practice using them. You can definitely pause the video at any point in time and practice using these tools on your own or as a student if you would like. And then ideally to plan using these tools to support feedback, engagement, and then also options for action and expression in your learning environment. So my name is Brenny, and if you have any questions in the video or if you think of some afterwards, feel free to send me an email. So thinking about formative assessments and why they are important. If we're thinking about Universal Design for Learning, which is our district instructional guiding framework, formative assessments kind of factor into a lot of those different UDL checkpoints. They definitely support engagement by keeping our students motivated, helping our students kind of have a direction to go. Formative assessments are those check-ins for their understanding to see where they are in mastering and their progress towards mastery of a goal. And so we know which direction to help students go to next. And the students can make goal-directed decisions afterwards after they see their scores. It also helps students kind of monitor their progress along the way and even create their own individual goals. It's also helpful, formative assessments are also helpful for giving feedback to students too, and to vary demands and resources as well, and to guide varying those demands and resources for students. So formative assessments can give you some information as the teacher on what students need additional review and support and scaffolding, and maybe which students have already mastered the goal and they can move on to something else. It's also helpful to use formative assessment to improve retrieval practice and really help move some of that information into long-term memory. So ideally, your students have that in a sustainable place. There are some research studies out there that talk about the importance of formative assessments as a part of a retrieval practice. Pooja Agrawal is someone that you can look up. She did a whole lot of research on this. She's an educational researcher. I believe she's a doctorate student, or she's Dr. Pooja Agrawal. But there's a lot of information that she has out there, and I have a link to that in the chat box on this specific slide, so you can get some more information on that. It's also helpful to include formative assessments from a UDL lens if we're thinking about the purple category here on our UDL guidelines. The last one in that category is options for comprehension. So formative assessments can be a way to check if students have comprehended the information and what additional information needs to be provided so they all have options to show their understanding. All right, so what do formative assessments look like? They can take on many different forms, and I think it's important that you realize that formative assessments do not always have to be a quiz or a test. Ideally, a formative assessment is a formative point in the student's learning experience where they're still forming an understanding, but they haven't reached that assessment that's high stakes, that summative assessment, that end project yet. So really, there shouldn't be a whole lot of stakes or really assessment and grading pieces tied to a formative assessment because it is a check-in. It's more of an informal type of check-in with students. So with that being said, it's important that we still continue to provide options to students, and you can definitely do that using a variety of formative assessment tools and strategies. You can do this by providing low-tech options, whether it's just paper or talking with students, using hand signals as a way to communicate understanding and formatively check in. But there's also some that you can use using technology and still provide choice, whether it's using kind of more of a testing format, which is a quiz, multiple choice test, a group type of activity, or even video or audio type of formative assessments. All right, and you can still provide different options to them. If you're wondering when do I provide formative assessments, there's a lot of research out there as well that talks about that. You could definitely put these in at the beginning of a lesson. Maybe you're using this formative assessment to kind of recap the information you learned the day before. So you start off your lesson or activity with a formative assessment, and then you kind of build from there and decide where you're going next. If you want a kind of example of how to do that using a technology tool, there is a wonderful strategy that's in the book, EDU Protocols. I have the first one linked there. It's in that book. But I also have a blog post linked on here from Ditch That Textbook, where Ditch That Textbook author Matt Miller talks about the way of using this EDU protocol called the Fast and the Curious as a formative assessment strategy. So this protocol is basically where you start every single lesson for a week with a formative assessment. And then on the last day, you kind of measure students' understanding and see how much they've grown over the course of the week. So it's only designed to be a short activity. So if you're interested in learning more about that and the benefits of doing that, I have that linked there. But other ways that you can use formative assessments, you can incorporate it after a learning activity. So if you're teaching block classes, you have a longer period of time that you're with students. So maybe after you've done some direct instruction or students have done some guided practice or worked in groups, then maybe everyone takes a formative assessment. So from there, as the teacher, you can look at their results and say, all right, we're ready to move on to the next task, or time for more review, time to revisit some of those topics that maybe we haven't quite mastered. It's also helpful to include formative assessment stations. I did a lot of station activities when I was in the classroom as a teacher because I felt like that was a really great way to cover a lot of content, but also kind of give students options along the way. So maybe one of the stations you have in your classroom is a formative assessment station where students are doing a review game, or it's a brain dump station where they talked about everything they've learned and that's the last station they visit. Or it's a video station where they kind of reflect on what they've learned. You can definitely build that in as a station rotation. Or you can also use formative assessments at the end of an activity, like an exit ticket, something students do right before you close up shop for the day. So if you're wondering, what are we going to learn about today? When I presented this session live, technically I showed the screen, and the participants who were in my live session voted on what they would like to learn about. Because this was only a half-hour session, we didn't have time to go through every single one of these, but I wanted to put these options on this presentation so people could revisit them afterwards and kind of learn if maybe there's one that piqued their interest, but we didn't have time to cover. So we have entry and exit ticket options, so Google Forms, Pear Deck, surveys, and polls like Mentimeter or Poll Everywhere and Flipgrid. And then we also have gamified options like quizzes, BlueKit, and Quizlet. Then we have Quizlet, Flashcard Factory, Insert Learning, Actively Learn, Screencastify, Edpuzzle, and TED Ed. So when we did this session live and everyone voted, I had them rank which ones they'd like to learn about. And overwhelmingly, everyone wanted to learn about some of the gamified options. And then secondary were vocab focus. So in the live session, we only had time to do the gamified options, but I have all of the tutorial resources you need to get started with any one of these on this slide deck, so you can pause and work through those at your own pace. So here we go. Gamified it is. So I'm going to jump ahead in my slides here. Just as a heads up, I'm not going in order. Right, so gamified options. As we know, students like to play games in class. It's kind of fun for them to do that. So there are a couple of different options that you can use here for gamifying formative assessment. I was a social studies teacher. I taught at the middle school level and then the high school. And I loved kind of starting a lesson with this type of activity. And my students would get so excited to the point to where they would come in the next day and they'd be like, are we starting with so-and-so or this game today? Because they would look forward to it. So if you want something that definitely ups the engagement, I would consider bringing in some of these options every now and then, not too heavy so they don't get kind of burned out on it. But definitely bringing them in because students think they're fun and it's a little bit more engaging than just taking a pencil paper type of formative assessment. Those definitely have their time and place, but these have a little bit more fun to them. So the first one I can show you is one called quizzes. Things to know with quizzes, and makes it a little bit different from some of the other options that are out there. Quizzes can be very individual. It's not necessarily a group activity unless you want to have students sit together and do it together. It's set to be an individual type of learning experience. And something that is great about quizzes is that there's a lot of different question types that you can put on there. There's multiple choice, there's multiple answer. You can add pictures to your question. So there's ways to kind of present things in a more UDL friendly way within this tool. You can add lots of different questions to a quiz or a game on quizzes. It doesn't have to be to set them out. You pretty much have unlimited. There are some more features on quizzes now that are paid, where you can build a whole lesson. I never use the paid version. I actually don't know personally anyone in BCSE who's using the paid version, because I think the free version is still pretty robust in what it offers. You can set up quizzes in a couple of different modes too, depending on how you would like to do this. The live version, students complete it in class, you kind of get them going, they use a join code and they get going on their device. It is a very device specific activity to where students don't have to be looking at your projector screen, or you don't have to be running the game on your device. Once they have the code or the link to join, they're looking at their computer screen. They're not reliant on you to advance them through the different questions. And that's something that I really like about quizzes, is that it is at the student's own pace and you're not the one kind of determining the pace of the activity. On the flip side of that, just know that it might take a little bit more time than maybe what you budgeted for, because the students are going through this at their own pace and they kind of work at things differently. So just build in a little bit of a buffer there. The other option for a quizzes game is that you can set it up to homework mode, which means that it can be done whenever they need to, and you can set a deadline for it. So I actually used to use this homework mode with my students all the time before I left the classroom, just as a way to help students practice. I didn't give too many actual tests in my class. I did more projects, but if I ever did do a test, I would set a quizzes, make it in, put it in homework mode, and then I'd give students the login for it. And throughout that whole week, I would leave that quizzes active, and students could go through and practice and play that game as many times as they wanted during school hours or outside of school hours. So you can turn off a day that it starts, turn off a date to where it closes, and students have access to it to play. And it has really good reporting features there as well, if you're curious about that. So if we dive into quizzes, I'll give you kind of a really quick overview here on what you can do. You can create an account here with your BCSC Google account. And I'm going to sign in. And I was a little sad, if just to warn you, if you have a name change, Quizzes does not remember your old email, because all my old Quizzes were lost after I got married and my name changed. So just a heads up there, you can maybe change them or at least share them with other people on your team before you have an email change. But it's kind of the teacher dashboard here. There are lots of examples ones here that you can probably get started with. If you haven't used this tool with your students, I would recommend kind of starting with some of these really low stakes ones that aren't associated with your content, so that students can practice learning the tool, and you can practice learning the tool before you actually start doing this activity with content in your class. So it's a little bit more low stakes friendly for them before they do a formative assessment with this tool. To build quizzes, you can either copy some of the examples that are here. You can search through this whole library of examples, and there's some for every subject area, every grade level. You can filter by that. Otherwise, you can create one from scratch here. But what I'm going to do is actually jump in to ones that I've already made. And here is one. All right. And here is really what the question builder looks like. So if I want to edit a question, all right, I can go through and do that. This just gives me a preview of my quiz. If I click edit is where I can configure this a little bit differently. So if I want to change this time here, by default, it always sets it to where students have 30 seconds to answer. And in a quizzes game, students get points, or they earn points for correct answers, number one. But then there is a little bit of an element of speed in these games as well. But you do have the ability to kind of toggle some of those settings to where if you don't want it to be speed focused, but more answer accuracy, you have those options on your teacher side of thing to really configure the game any way you would like. Total flexibility there. So I have this all set up here. I have all my questions. I can add pictures if I want to, like this one has a picture. It's all good to go. And this is a fill in the blank. So I want to show you another question type here. There's not just multiple choice. You can also do a fill in the blank options as well. And it does check for spelling. All right. So whenever it is ready to go, and I'm finished editing this, I'll just click publish up here in the top right corner. And then I have my options here. So here is the live version. So the instructor leads this. This is good if you're wanting to start the game in class. If you want this to be something students do outside of class, this is when you would assign it as homework. And if I click that, I have the option to decide when this closes. And I can set it up to where students have multiple attempts to do this, or you can even have it open for 6 months if you would like to not have a deadline. So that's another good option if you want to set up study code or study sets for students to kind of practice at any point in time. You can set up your quizzes account to where you have students join your class and they can always access your quizzes there. I never did that. I just did it by links, but that's just personal preference. And then down here is when you have some of your settings here. Do they get to see the answers after they do it? Do they have unlimited attempts? All of those good things. All right, so that is an example of quizzes. And I'm just going to toggle your guys' video here differently. Got it covering some of my content. It's throwing me off a little bit. The joys of Zoom and virtual workshops, right? All right. So if I wanted to go back, I could do a live session. And this is just kind of what it looks like here. You do have the option to technically control this at your pace, but I think the beauty of quizzes is that classic mode, your students don't have to wait on you to get going. So this is what your students would do to join. Just go to this link, enter a code. You can drop that into your It's Learning course if you wanted to, send it to them in a message. And whenever you would be ready to go, you would click start. So I know I'm going through this pretty quickly, so you all don't have to join this unless you absolutely want to, because I probably won't have you guys go through every question. But whenever I'm ready, I would click start. Oh, I have to have at least one person, so I'll join. Have any of you guys used quizzes before? No, it was popular, at least right before I left the classroom was when it was starting to get pretty popular. So I felt like that's when I was presenting on it quite a bit. Yeah, I loved quizzes. All right. And it does play music for your students too. They can toggle that off on their settings as they join. All right, so this is what we see on the teacher side. Shows this, it shows the person who's playing, and it shows kind of their progress. And then it would show their correct answers and whatnot as they go through. And if you want to turn off the music, you do have the ability to do that at the top as well. And you can even change color scheme if you would like. So whenever you finish playing a game on quizzes, something that's also really great is that whenever you end the game or everyone's finished, it gives you a really good summary of your results. So since this is on my new version of quizzes and not my old profile that had my old student data, whenever someone completes a quiz, it shows how they did here. Here we go. I have at least one. It shows the participants, how they scored, the questions. It gives you some pretty good data here, so you have an idea on things to focus on, and really gives you that information that you need with a formative assessment to build instruction. So ideally they do better next time. So love quizzes, and it is such a fun tool. The next example we are going to look at is another great one, and this one's called BlueKit. First learned about this tool from one of our awesome foreign language teachers here in BCSC. And it is a really fun game as well. And the great thing about BlueKit is compared to some of the other instructional kind of gamified learning tools is that BlueKit has so many different types of games built into this one game tool. And that's why I like it, is I feel like you can use this one for a while and it's still going to be fresh and new and exciting for students because it's so different. So similar here, you have some options with BlueKit and how you can set up your questions, and you can add pictures to your questions, kind of similar to quizzes like I just showed you. They have like new releases of games that they put out there, so you can even have new games and types added for your students. The cool thing, and the thing that makes BlueKit unique from some of the other tools on here, is that these little characters that you see on my screen, these are called BlueKits, or I think are they called BlueKits? Corey would know. But as your students earn points and they play BlueKit, they earn like cash where they can go to the store and buy these little characters and decorate their own. Did I say that right, Corey?
Yeah, I think you said it right.
Okay. Yeah, I love this one. I think it's so fun. And I know people used it, I think quite a few middle school teachers used it last year during the pandemic. But I think it's definitely applicable for elementary. I think would love this. And I think even secondary too. High school kids still love playing games.
Yeah, the Spanish department at East actually got it as part of their resource adoption last year.
Yes, which is so smart to like use something like this. It's so flexible. Love this tool. So there are paid versions and then there's free. You still can do a lot with the free version of this tool, which is good. Hopefully it stays that way. So this is kind of your teacher dashboard here. Again, you have the ability to search through and kind of find some of the ones that are out there and borrow and steal from other people who've made awesome games, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. On my teacher dashboard here, if I wanted to look and see what others have made, if I click discover, this is where I can search for all different kinds of sets that are out there. And if I see one that I like, this is 137 questions. Whew, that's a lot of animals. So if you really want to get to using this tool, go for this one. I don't know if personally I would copy this one, but if this is one that I want to use, you have the ability to either just favorite it so you can revisit it if you're just scrolling through and don't have time to build right now. But if I click duplicate, then I can customize it and delete some of these questions. So maybe it's not 137 questions. Otherwise, I could just play this game as it is right now. So I'm going to go back to my dashboard here. Here are some examples of ones that I made. And it's really easy to build these in BlueKit. Just the create button here at the top. Some of the other questions up here. Play is where you would join someone else's game. Up here, your stats. So telling you how people have done, but also it's specific to your profile. So if you've been playing and kind of earning some of these points, as you can tell, I've really not done a whole lot as a student playing this game. But if you are playing this game often and earning some points and stuff here, this is where you can kind of see that. And then the market is where you can buy some of the fun things, and that's where students can go and kind of reward themselves for their hard work and success in BlueKit. If I wanted to start from scratch, create button. You do have to have a cover image here. You can upload a file, go through their image gallery, and they all kind of just pull up cute little artsy pictures. Have to give it a title. And then you have some settings here to where it's public or private. Just know that if you do private, you're the only one who can play that game. So you will want it to be public so your students can. You can actually import from Quizlet as well. So I know we're not going to talk about Quizlet because that wasn't one of our top ranked ones today. But Quizlet is wonderful for making vocabulary flashcards and digital vocab. I used to use that tool all the time as both a student when I was in college, but then also as a teacher. You can import any study set from Quizlet into BlueKit. So if you've already spent time making vocabulary flashcards, you can import that and it makes question sets based on those flashcards. It's really, really easy. You just have to pull up your Quizlet account and walk through that steps. It guides you through it every time you go through this process. Super easy. That's how I actually think I made all of the ones that are on here, because I made study sets that were Indiana history for another presentation. But I would just go through this, build through, do all my questions, and get going from there. All right, so I'm going to show you an example of one that I've already made. All right, so here is an example, and you have some options here. So solo is just you playing it by yourself, solo game here. But if you do host, this is where you have all of those fun options or games within this one game. All right, so whenever I click host, here are some different options. If you're like not really sure what one of these are, if you click these options, it'll tell you the type of game it is, but they also explain all of those on kind of the BlueKit Discover page as well. So lots of different choices here. I like the cafe one personally. Corey, you like that one too? It's like cute and like little food and things. You like make plates of food and you can go feed people based on how you score the answers correctly. It kind of reminds me of like a game that was really popular, I think when I was in elementary school, middle school. I don't remember what it was called, but my sister and I used to play it all the time. I want to say it was on Disney.com, but yeah, personal stories aside. Options here. Racing one's also really good and lots of people can play that one. So I think we'll actually just do the racing one. So if you click this, it tells you about the game. So how many people are suggested to play it, how many people are maximum that can play, and then you get the option to start your game. So similar to some of the other quiz options and review games that are out there, you can have some flexibility here. Basically, if you allow student accounts and students who play BlueKit regularly, it will track their data. So it's ideal if they're kind of like wanting to get BlueKit cash and buy their little characters. Otherwise, if you turn this off, then students just play and it doesn't add to their profile. You can set the threshold here for the number of questions, allow students to join late, and whenever you're ready, you host it. Has music as well. You need a couple people to play it. And you can share this here. Now, if you're thinking, well, this is cool, I can play this live, but what if there's a time when maybe I don't have the time to play this live with my students in class? Some of the games that were on the last screen before we toggled over, some of them are for asynchronous, so at students' own pace, not live, and it will tell you that before you select the game, so you don't have to play every single one of them live, which was really helpful last year when we were in lots of virtual settings here, and teachers were wanting to kind of give some flexibility. I want to say Corey last year did this game and she had like a live session that students could join. And then she also had one that was asynchronous. So students had choice. All right. So students can even change their little character there if they want. If you have someone join, you're like, that student's not in my class, then you can always kick them out too. I know I had some high school students that would share game codes when I was a teacher. And then I had like the entire football team on one of my Kahoots. So if that happens to you, you can technically remove people if you need to, but hopefully you don't. Whenever you're ready and you click start, then you can play. And it loads it, and then you'll see the questions on your screen. And it goes. Maybe. Or you're going to do better than me because I'm not paying very good attention. All right. So as Corey's going through and hopefully doing better on this game than me, because it looks like she is, it's just a fun game. And I love this because there's so many options here. And again, your screen is the one that's really the leaderboard, but isn't the one that's driving the game. So your students have some flexibility in playing on their own device. They don't have to wait for you to kind of set the pace there. They just need you to start the game, and then they're free to go on their own. So Corey, you can definitely still continue to play BlueKit. I'm going to go back because it is technically after 4:30, and I just want to touch really quickly on this last one, just because I feel like this is the one that's new-ish to some. And it's the last little gaming tool that I had in here today. So if you're wanting to stay on for this last little part, this won't take me super long to go over. This is another one of those review game type of tools. The thing that makes this one different than the last two is that this one's a little bit more robust in what your students can do after they play the game. So you can set this up to where, again, ooh, do not want to play that video. I want you to hear my voice twice. You can set up this game on here to where after students play this little multiple choice game, then they go to different resources, or they go to a different tutorial, or they play the game again, depending on their kind of score. So this website does talk about differentiation, which isn't really the same as UDO, but what you can use on this website and this gaming tool is kind of build a whole lesson and then send students to different remedial resources if you know they need that extra practice. So that's something that makes this one a little bit more unique, is you can set up different branches depending on how they do. So this is called Quizlet. If you were an elementary teacher, and I know we had a few that were in here a few minutes ago, they're still here. It's like we might. The thing with Quizlet that I like is that it has a lot of connections to elementary standards. So that's great. They're kind of building and adding more at the secondary level, but elementary teachers, I first heard about this tool from another elementary teacher. All right, so the last tool that we talked about in the formative assessment session was a gamified learning tool called Quizlet. So Quizlet has been around for a little bit, but I don't know if it's being heavily used by a variety of grade levels and buildings. I know it's used in pockets. It is a tool that is a freemium tool, so there is a free version and a premium. You can get by using the free version. You just won't have some of the bonus like level up features and all of the fancy export strategies and options for your data, but you can still get pretty good data from this tool and can still play the game with lots of students if you have a lot of students that you're teaching. So Quizlet, you go in, you create your teacher account. You can create it through Google single sign-on. And when students join a Quizlet game or session that you've built, they join with a code. So it's kind of similar to some of those other tools that we see where students don't necessarily have to have accounts. They just join with a code to your class. If you are wanting to use this tool pretty heavily, it is helpful if you do build a class and then you can add students to it by typing in their email address or having them join your class via a code. That's just helpful if you know that you want to be using some of the data reporting pieces and kind of have that as an option. So I've already created an account here, and this is what I see on kind of my main screen. You can filter different examples of already pre-made games by subject area and grade level. They have a whole library here where you can search through. I can look through all different types of resources, grade, resource type, all different kinds of things on here. So here are some different ones, and these do kind of bring up a lot more of the Common Core type of standards and national standards, but there are some very helpful ones still on here. So whenever I find one that I like this one here, if this is one that I would like to use, I have some options here. So I did not make this one. I have some options. I can start using this already if I like what it has as is. If you see here, there's a lot of different question types. There's you can add visuals to questions. There's multiple choice. There's also multiple answer questions. You have some flexibility on what you can do. There's not like an extended free response option because it is supposed to be a quick type of formative assessment tool, but you do have the ability to kind of customize some of these. And by default, all of the questions are set to where you have 30 seconds to answer. So there is a little bit of speed factored into this, but you do have the ability to toggle the speed setting if you would like to give your students a little bit more time. When students play this game, it's unique in that they can play it individually or as a team. It just depends on how you've set this up as the teacher. So whenever I find a resource I like, I can look over here, I can preview this quiz so I can kind of get the student view. And that's something that I love about this tool is before you even play a game, you can always see what the students see. You can even go through this as a demo with the students beforehand. I can also play this as is. I can share a link to it if I want to share this with a teacher friend of mine. I can print this, and that's also something great is that all of these can be printed. So if you want to have the paper option for your students, it is there and easy for you to use. If I want to edit this, this is where I make my own copy so I can customize it as I need to, add or delete questions to kind of make it my own. So whenever I want to do that, I'll just click edit the questions. And what I'm going to do is just delete some of these questions. I can add a picture here. As you see, when I edit any one of these questions, I can move it up, I can move it down, I can use images, and here's some of the other really awesome things. I can change the time, I can use audio, so I can add an audio file there if I want to. That's really great if you have students who need to have the audio accommodations. But the other piece here is I can turn on text-to-speech. So whenever students play this game, they have a little text-to-speech button, and it will read aloud the question and then all of these answer options. So by default, I always like to turn that on for every single one of these questions. You do have to do it individually for each question. So that's the only thing if you're copying a quiz from someone else, and you do have to go through and do that for each one of those if you would like. And if you see here, there's also the link button below this. So that's where I can also add pictures from other websites as well. So if I want to have pictures that go with each one of these answers, I can pull ones that are saved on my device, or I can find ones from the web. So whenever I am finished there, I'm just going to delete some of these questions to make it a little bit shorter. All right. And whenever I am finished, I'm going to click Save to my library. All right. And your library is where any one of the quizzes that you have made will be saved. So when I've made a quiz game here, I can click it. And this is where I'm going to see some options to play this game. So I can still preview it if I want to, but here are the options that we have for my students. So you have a live option, which is play or start a class game. And that's really good if you have your students in person. You want this to all be played at the same time together. The option that's a little bit more at the student's own pace, and they can do this outside of class time, is give us homework. If you do the give us homework option, then you set a deadline that this closes, and you can even configure it to where students can play this as many times as they want until that deadline is approached. That would be a really helpful option if you know that you want to give students practice. If you have a test coming up, some type of bigger stakes assessment, and you want to give them this as a study resource, all they have to do is just have the link to this quiz and they can start playing. Whenever I'm ready, I'll click Start a Class Game. And here is the beauty of Quizlet. It does talk about differentiation quite a bit on their website, but I like to take that word out of this, because that's not really what UDL is. UDL is providing options. And I do think that Quizlet can provide you some options here for students when you plan ahead and be pretty proactive about it. So you can assign this to your class, or you can even add a new class if you like. I kind of made one here just because it's a little bit easier to get going. And you do have to have at least one class or some type of phrase here for people to join. And then this is the part I'm talking about that is pretty awesome. Whenever you make a quiz or a game on Quizlet, you can set it up to where, depending on the scores that students get, it's in mastery mode, and even some of the different flexible choices you have here, you can give students additional resources, the option to retake. You can pretty much send them anywhere depending on the score that they get. You can set that threshold and determine what resources or next steps that students do based on how they do on this particular activity. So, all right, I can turn on music and sounds here. I can show the timer. You can decide how many options students have. If I click advanced options, I can see some of the results and options that students have. They can get feedback right away, correct answers, all good to go there. All right, this is where if you wanted to do the homework option, and then assign as an exam, makes it a test. So students don't get unlimited attempts and they get unlimited time to do that. If you do mastery mode, then students get to retake some of those questions until they get that flexibility there. All right, so if I click assign activity, here's where I can decide those follow-up activities. If I don't want to send students to additional resources based on their score, I would just do skip for now. But if I wanted to, this is where I have some options here. They score less than 50% on this, then I can choose resources that I want them to go to next, or they can take the quiz over again. If I don't want them to take the quiz over again, I can just uncheck that box. Otherwise, I can give them all of these different resources. I can add a link, a file, a video, another Quizlet resource if I find one, and it even gives me recommendations on what other people had done. So if I go back, there we go. And you can set any one of these thresholds here. It's totally up to you on what you can do, or you can skip that. All right, and this is where students go to join this game. So you have two options here in the type of game that you would like your students to play. The leaderboard game is a little bit more individual. The students are going through this at their own pace on their device. They don't have to rely on the teacher device to play the game. All they need is just this join link and code, and they're set, and the leaderboard game is individual. The team versus team is a little bit more team-based, and it randomly puts students on one of two teams. And they don't have to necessarily work together, but their scores are contributing to their team effort. All right, so here are some additional things that you can do for grouping. I don't usually configure all of these just because it's a lot of additional clicks, but you do have more flexibility there if you would like. If I play the leaderboard game, you do get the option here to copy the class code, and this is the link that students would join. So I'm just going to join this really quick so you can see. All right. All right, so there is my test student. So I joined on my phone and I'm playing as myself on here as well. And my leaderboard here just shows me how my students are doing. So I would see all of my students' names and I can kind of gauge their progress. So this is really helpful because students are doing this individually. This gives you as the teacher kind of an idea on how long it's going to take students to do this and what students might need additional help. You don't have to project this in front of everyone because it will show their name and then their score and how they're doing. So that is not something I would recommend, but it is helpful for you to see on your screen for your own purposes. All right, so that is an example of how to use Quizlet. So again, there's lots of flexibility in this tool, namely that you have the ability to give students different resources based on their score afterwards and can send them to additional support and review if they need it. So I hope that this has been helpful. And if you have questions or you want to learn more about some of the tools we didn't have time to get to today in the session, please look through the slide deck and send me questions if you have them. Thank you.